Welcome back to Your 1230, the only podcast where our guests tell their story with the help of 12 questions in just 30 minutes. Today, we are very excited to be joined by Bill and Patrick Pardue. Bill is an attorney, advocate for social justice for all people, carpenter, social worker, reformer, spiritualist, and mystic. Patrick is a writer, explorer, and thinker. Welcome. We are thrilled to have you both tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Of course. And Bill, we're going to start with
Glad to
you.
be here.
Good to hear. Good to hear. I want to start with you, Bill. There's a lot of things that you do in your bio. If you meet somebody new, what do you tell them that you do?
Oh, well, I retired from law a month ago, and I'd spent 30 years doing that. And before that, I was a carpenter. Before that, I was a social worker. I worked with Red Cross Disaster Services nationwide and worldwide. Went to Central America with them. I went to the Arctic Circle. I went to the Marianas Islands in the South Seas. And that was just response to disasters. And before that, if I can remember that far back, I worked with emotionally disturbed delinquent teenagers in a wilderness setting. And that's pretty much it. So I've always been in kind of crisis intervention work, including family law, which is always crisis intervention.
Yes. Plenty of things I want to follow up on there for sure. But Patrick, you too do a few different things, include you are Bill's son. How do you discover at first that working together was a good partnership for you two? Because that's not always in the cards for father-son duo.
Well, I think that we think in similar ways about what we want from the book, obviously, and what we wanted to create. And he had first written it about 40 years ago now, and then he came to me and said, when I got old enough to be able to work on it, can you edit this for me? And can you basically make it all readable, is what he said. There was a good story there, but he just needed it to be ironed out, basically, and the details to be, kind of fine-tuned, so to speak.
Okay. And taking a step back, what can you tell us about the book? Because I have not properly introduced it.
So it's a story of my 15 months living in the wilderness with 10 emotionally disturbed delinquent teenagers who had been thrown out of the Chicago juvenile system, the Illinois juvenile system, the Texas Boys Ranch. And it was kind of a last resort for them. These were boys who could not control their emotions, therefore could not be in a classroom, could not really be around civilized society for any length of time without either hurting somebody or creating some sort of a chaos. And so they sent them out in the woods, and the agency, the Boys Ranch, had purchased 20 acres out in the woods in East Texas and had no electricity, no power. Of course, there were no cell phones back then. There was no water unless we hauled it in, and there was no shelter. And we were out there to build our own shelters, to be responsible for ourselves. And in the meantime, we got to travel wherever we wanted to in the United States. They gave us an old bus, some canoes. We went canoeing, we went mountain climbing, you name it, we did it.
Okay, let's start with when you showed up there. What was the first? Did you travel to the site with these? I guess students would be what would be the campers? What's the proper term there?
Oh man, the proper term is emotionally disturbed delinquent teenagers.
Okay.
The colloquial would be wild young men.
Okay, let's go with the proper term. So when you were face to face with these teenagers for the first time, did you travel together? Were you making travel plans? Did they know what they were getting into? Did you have any idea what we got into? What was that first conversation like?
No, I really didn't. I was hired I graduated from University of Texas, and I saw that posting for this wilderness camping, and they didn't have to convince me I wanted to go, but they didn't tell me what the boys were like. So I didn't find out about them until they actually showed up. And I hitchhiked 400 miles to get out there because I didn't have a car at the time. And so you're out in the middle of the woods, right? And they And when we first met him, it was at a park setting. They came off of the bus, rickety old bus came up. The leader comes off the bus first, the enforcer comes off second, and then some of the other guys were thrown off the bus. But that was my second interview. It was my real interview with these boys. If I didn't pass that test, then I might as well take my phone, take my backpack, and go back where I came from. And so it wound up where I had to fight both the leader and subdue him, and the enforcer and subdue him within a 45-minute period to prove that that's where I should be. If I'd failed that test, I was gone. The advantage of that, which I now know in retrospect, is that it made me the alpha male. So all of a sudden, the leader of that group had been dispossessed, and he was on the fringes. He was never an integral part of that group after that first meeting. And I inherited his enforcer.
So you know you're going to have a good story when a minor footnote is I hitchhiked hundreds of miles to get there. So you know that whatever is going to follow is much more exciting than that. You just kind of referenced that you fought two teenagers here to kind of determine who was going to take charge of this group. I'm assuming this was not discussed. How did that happen? What was this? Did they just begin through the confrontation?
So they got off the bus. I was sitting at a picnic table. The other guy, there were two counselors for 10 boys. The other counselor was a parachutist, Vietnam War, young guy. And he was retired. And he was the other counselor, but he was sitting on one end of the table. He wasn't going to do anything because he knew the boys. He wasn't going to do anything to help me. He was also testing me. Do I want this guy to be my partner, in corralling these guys? So anyway, they get at the table. The leader sits across the table from me, lights up a cigarette, and he blows smoke right in my face, right? Didn't say anything. I said, look, dude, I'm going to give you one pass here, but don't do it again. 5 seconds later, right? So I'm across the top of the table. I take him out. We roll down the hill. And the thing is, you could not punch. You could not, because this is something you were trying to establish a relationship. And if you hurt them then, that was going to carry through the whole thing. All you could do is subdue them. And thanks to my older brother, who was always trying to kill me, I knew something about wrestling, right? So I could subdue both of them. After the first guy, the leader, came up the hill, he had lost all face at this point. He had lost everything that he had worked for. So he said to me, I'm going to get an axe and I'm going to come kill you tonight when you're in your tent sleeping. I said, that's cool, dude. I'll be awake waiting for you. So, and then when I dealt with the next in line, it was the same thing. But the enforcer became one of my best teenagers out there because he helped me. He was my right-hand man. He was strong. He had influence over the group, and he could help me manage them when I most needed it.
Okay. Thank you for painting that picture, Bill. Patrick, growing up, I'm sure you heard variations of the story. You had your own thoughts. You drew conclusions. The first time you read the book, were you more impressed? Were you, this is not capturing it? What was your thought when you first, 40 years in the making, here's the book. Now you read it, and it's a story you probably heard your whole life. And what was that like?
Yeah, I definitely did hear it growing up all the time. It was always a great story.
I'm sorry.
No, I appreciate it. No, I appreciate it. It was a great story. But then when I actually read it, and just, to read about it in detail, it was pretty amazing to see, well, like he said, that, him establishing himself as the leader of the group, and to read about the events as they actually happened rather than just, being told what happened. So, and yeah, like I said, to see him establish himself as the alpha male, like you said, in that group was pretty amazing too.
But that was all informal. That wasn't anything that was planned. It was just a fight, and that's what it turned into.
I don't even know if the term fight is proper there, because the way you describe it, it sounds like it was more of a physical restraint that, there is going to be a confrontation here. I'm not going to hurt you, but I'm going to show you that I am in charge here. I'm not going to punch. I'm going to just restrain, and I'm going to take as possible control of the group. And I think, given the circumstances you lay out, you didn't have many options. Is there anything else from that first reading that jumped out at you as, Dad, I had no idea, or this is not exactly how you told me it was growing up?
There were a lot of things in there that one of the big ones was his where was that, in Arkansas, where you guys were on the river?
Yeah, flash flood.
Flash flood. I never knew about any of that. Never heard stories about any of that growing up. So to read about that was very amazing too, and that he'd actually been through that and survived that. And because, like I said, I'd never heard about that before. So that was another great story.
Okay. So I'm sure writing this book together, editing, working on it as a project, as a father-son duo, you've learned things about each other that, both are part of the book, as well as what it's like to be colleagues in a way. We'll start with you, Bill. What was one thing that has opened your eyes working with your son on a project of this level or this magnitude?
I think how deep he is. He's really a deep thinker. And I like to think he got that from me. And he's socially conscious. All his good traits. He just kind of encapsulated all his good looks, everything else he got from me.
Well said, Dad.
I think he got those from his mother. He's just really a good guy. I'm proud of both my sons. They're just good people. They care about other people. They've been successful. They have integrity. I'm just proud of them. I'm proud to leave them as a legacy in the world, because they are, whatever their circumstances are, they're gonna make it better for others.
I love that answer, and it's a tough spot to follow. But Patrick, you're up.
I think the biggest take away in terms of reading this story and working with him was I got to know more about his, I would say, his willpower as a person. Being in this situation and getting through the situation, just making it through being with these kids and leading them as well. And that was back then. He's still the same person now. He's only grown in that sense. And also just his persistence in seeing this book through to completion. So just his willpower in general, I think, and that's something I've always noticed and respected about him too. So.
And Joe and I share the philosophy of the Stoics, which is very simple. Live dangerously, go through life with an open heart, open mind, and don't be afraid of anything.
So that's gonna take me off track, because Stoics is something I was recently introduced to and impressed / want to learn more about the way of life. But saying not to be afraid of everything, live dangerously, I don't want to say is easier said than done, but how is that practiced, or how have you been able to do it in a way where you're living that life, and it's a way of life as opposed to a phrase or something that you aspire to, more of you're actually doing it?
Well, live dangerously just means step outside of your comfort zone. It doesn't mean go take 10 wild boys, and it doesn't have to be that.
But you did do that too.
It can be as difficult to tell someone, let's say a partner that you have, look, this relationship is over with. Some people can't do that at all, but that's taking that step is living dangerously, because you're outside of your comfort zone. And in terms of don't be afraid of anything, fear is, it's self-perpetuating, really. It's just a thought that you have about something. You have to, if there is something that you're fearful of, you have to step up to the plate, no matter what it is, whether it's telling your partner, we're done, or it's quitting your job because you don't like it anymore, even though you don't know where your next paycheck is going to come from. Just having a belief in yourself, your own ability to manifest things. And and this is all blind, right? I mean, you don't face fear. I'm not afraid of that. You don't do that. That's what you get after you faced it. That's the prize.
Now, we didn't practice this, and I didn't set you up for it, but I will say I get to talk to some amazing folks on the show. And the two things that you've hit there are something I hear from professionals that are in the top of what they do, people who are always striving to kind of get to the next level in their personal development in their lives. First, that being in your comfort zone, you're not going to grow. You are not going to kind of push those boundaries. And being one step or even two steps outside the comfort zone is where you're going to see those difficulties, but where you're going to grow, where you're going to get better. And the second part, the fear, you're choosing to be fearful, or you're choosing to be anxious, to be afraid, to have the worry. That self-perpetuating is the word you used, and I wrote it down because that's what it is. It's something that you kind of build up in your head, and you have most of the time a choice whether or not to be held prisoner or to decide to move forward. So I love how you kind of phrase that there and how you paint that picture that these two things, when we say dangerously, we just mean live out of that comfort zone and then choosing not to be fearful when you have that choice. So I love that. Absolutely. One of the things you mentioned, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, we don't realize we write our own stories, right? Our story about what we're fearful of, we're writing that story. And we can change that anytime we want. We can say, okay, I'm not going to be afraid of this time, or I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do something else. And so we can't blame anybody else for how our life goes, even though we're always going to have enemies. There's always going to be people who don't like us, no matter who we are, and going to try to disparage us. But we got to rise above that. We have to have enough self-confidence. And that's built over, what have you done? What did you do this? Well, I told my girlfriend that. Now I'm more self-confident about women at this point, or men, or whatever it is, right? So it's an important thing to know that that we write our own story.
And I would say that's the third piece, the taking full responsibility for our decisions, for the outcomes, even if it's not what we planned for, not what we hoped for, and not where we should have been, but taking that responsibility and being, having the confidence in ourselves to make the right decisions, and when things don't work out, to kind of right that ship. Excellent.
And learn from it.
Absolutely.
And learn something from it. That's how you grow.
Just revisiting one thing that you had said, Bill, I want to ask you, Patrick. Bill mentioned his two sons as being the legacy that he's leaving the world. I think that's something that sometimes younger people don't always think about, what legacy they are going to leave, want to leave. Having such a great example in your dad, hey, have you thought about what you'd like people to say about you when you're not around? And if you have, how are you working toward that so far?
I would say, well, adding to what he said about living dangerously, I mean, I agree that it's, doing things you're afraid of, but I also think this plays into me as a person. It's also living your life to the fullest, getting the most out of your life as you possibly can while you're here, and not being, living your life to the fullest, basically. And that's one of the things I want to be remembered for, as somebody who, basically, I enjoyed my life as much as I could while I was here. I wasn't afraid to be who I was and do the things I wanted to do, because there are a lot of people who don't take chances because they're afraid of what other people are going to think, or they're afraid of failing. But I want to be remembered as somebody who, went all the way, did everything I wanted to do. Even if I didn't always succeed, at least I lived as much as I possibly could. And I also want to be remembered, obviously, for being a good person, and for genuinely, helping people and trying to help people and doing the right thing. So I think those two things, as of this point, would be the things I would want to be remembered for.
Excellent. And you've led me into my next question. I promise this is not scripted for anybody listening. But the line that jumped out, Bill, from your bio was social justice for all people, with all in quotations. What do you mean exactly by that, and how do you live that?
Well, I have spent a lot of my years studying philosophers, religions, mysticism, you name it. I've read it, and I've tried to learn to be better, right? How can I proceed through this life and be better? And I think we're all born with the ability, with programmed to be the best person we can be, but we let other people get in the way of that. I love it. So just for me, summary-wise, there's a headstone in Tombstone, Arizona, of a gunslinger. And what that says on the headstone is this: be what you is, because if you be what you ain't what you is. So it's being yourself, finding out who you are, being that person, because that's where most of your power comes from. When it comes from being who you are, there you are unstoppable. You are seriously, it's like Curry going out and shooting 3 points, and he's the highest 3-point shooter. If you've ever played basketball, right, sometimes you get in the zone. It's being in the zone. It's doing the things with your life that get you in the zone. And it's a zone that continues through the rest of your life. So that's what I see. That's worked for me.
And that's a good answer. How are you helping others? Because when we talk about having the ability to get out of your comfort zone and to try hard things, that's not always the case. That's not easy for a lot of people. How have you helped others acknowledge that's what they need to do and then kind of take that step when you have?
People find their way to me that need somebody to give them the confidence that they need to have to proceed through life. Just like the boys, that we came together because that's what the universe wanted. We both had something to learn from each other. They taught me how to be a man, and I taught them how to be a productive person in society and be responsible for their own actions. So we come together. This universe is not just happenstance. It's not chaos. We have to look what's put in front of us every day. And if we don't like it, then we know that is a test. And if we can get through that test, when we do it, we're better people, right? And as you get, people know that with you. I mean, they can speak to you and they can see within a short period of time, is this somebody who, has something that I would like to have that they have, right? So we're all trying to be the best, should be trying to be the best people we can possibly be. And then there's world peace. Or world peace.
Yeah. So growing up with the dad like you've had, Patrick, how do you remember growing up in that household as a child with your brother? I asked you specifically because before I could get into the studio tonight, I had to put my 2 boys to bed, and they were not interested in doing that. So I'm reminded that, before you were, again, co-authors and working on a project together, that you were father son, and that there was a dynamic there. How do you remember the early years from growing up with your brother, being at home with your dad?
Again, going back to the just his strength as a person growing up, I think, and as a father, that's always been the biggest thing, that I remember from that period. And his integrity as a person, his willingness to stand up for and always do what's right, but just his strength of character as a person, I think, just as a whole. And that's what I've always noticed the most about him. So throughout my whole life.
That's a good answer. And
that's what I admire in my son, is his strength of character.
And that's not always. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say he got that from his mother, but yeah, half and half.
Okay, good.
That's a
good,
50-50 deal.
Good addition there. And I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Bill to start with the numerous things he did. I'm sure he spent most of his time as an attorney when you were a kid, but how did you tell your friends what he did or what he was about?
You mean as an attorney, or just
in general? If you're at school and says, "Hey, what does your dad do?" How would you answer that?
Yeah, I mean, I would usually tell them obviously his job title first, because that's what you would think of. But then I guess, well, I mean, some of the memories I have, I remember growing up in high school, and some of my friends would go to the same gym that my dad would go to. I had this distinct memory, and they'd always say how hard he would work out. They say, is that Bill? He's in there just pumping those weights away, just lifting more than everybody else. And I remember one of my friends would always say that to me when he'd go to the gym in our town, and you always see my dad there and say that. You'd say, "But your dad just lifts more than everybody in there. Just goes hard on those weights."
So I have a very funny story real quick.
Please.
With my older son, right? I used to play a lot of street basketball, and he played some basketball too, but there was a particular, and this was outdoor. street ball. So anybody who could come in would come in. So he and his three friends were coming down the old basketball court. And one of his friends says, "Oh my God, there's that old guy down there. He is terrible, man. We don't want to play with him. He's a friggin' bully." And my son sheepishly turns to him and says, "Yeah, that's my dad." But they're still his friends.
So I mean, that's a good story, and you probably are responsible for their lifelong friendship. So that's excellent there on all fronts. There's much worse things than having your younger son be told that your dad was in this gym with me and he's working harder than everybody else. So that's a good memory to recall. Somehow we're already coming up on time. I do want to revisit the book. Is it available, or when is that going to be available for our readers to check out? Because with the story as you start with, I can imagine that it's going to be one to be tough to put down.
Yeah, it's available now. It's on Amazon. And it's
Okay.
just been republished by Books to Life just to lower the price, because it's such a machination of everything to try to lower the price on your own book. It's like, makes me want to tear my head out, my hair out.
And who should? So we'll post the book for sure. Who do you think should read the book?
Oh, anybody who's interested in a good story. I will tell you that the most distinct reaction I've had from it is my older brother, 70 years old. He calls me one night and he's crying. He's crying. I've never heard him cry before. He's bawling. I mean, he can't even talk. Finally, I said to him, "What's wrong? Did somebody die? Blah, blah, blah." He said, "No, I just finished reading your book."
Well, if that shouldn't be the testimonial that goes either on the back cover or right inside the front, I don't know what should be for the next reprinting, but that must be nice to hear from your older brother.
Oh, yes, great.
So what's next for you two?
We're just seeing where the book takes us at this point. I think just seeing where we go with it.
And I have 3 other books, which I'm also promoting, and I'm writing something new. But I just got an email from one of the publishers that said, "If you don't do anything else, don't stop writing. Promise me you'll keep writing." And that's enough to motivate me, right? I mean, that's some positive feedback, and we all need that, right? No matter how strong-willed we are, how confident we are, it's nice to hear every once in a while somebody who affirms what you think about yourself. There's always enemies out there.
With that, and when we first spoke, and no change tonight, I felt I could listen to stories from you all day, Bill. Of course, I will keep to our 30 minutes. But sometimes it's difficult for people to have great experiences, be able to tell great stories, and then have it to translate into a book. How have you been able to do that for those who are thinking about writing and are unsure of where to start? Or, yeah, I can tell a story, sitting at a bar, but no, I can't write it into a book. How are you able to do that?
Well, I was motivated to do it because I kept telling people the story and they kept saying, "Hey, that's a great story. You should write it." And I'd never written a book before. And my first experience wasn't that great. I mean, I wrote it longhand because there weren't computers back then. And I had to have somebody type it because I didn't know how to type. And I sent it to a publisher in Boston and they came back to me. They had it for a while because they were thinking about it. And they got back to me, and I should not admit this, I guess, in public, but they said, "You know what, man, that is a great story, but you are not much of a writer." So enter my son, the creative writing major, who took it over and resuscitated it, brought it back from near death.
Speaking of near death, I'm sure you weren't all that excited to give him his first set of notes. So we'll wrap up here. What was it like when you wanted to tell him the first time, "Hey, this needs to be written better. This is how I would do it." Or just that first time is like, "Okay, this needs to be changed a little bit." Was it difficult at all, or what was that like?
No, when I've had enough people working for me. If I give somebody something to do, I do not supervise. I trust them. Number one, if I didn't think they could do it, I wouldn't give it to them. I trust them. I leave them alone with it. I didn't have to make any corrections to what he did because I knew he could do it.
And we didn't go back much and forth on the actual story itself because I kept, all that intact. I didn't remove anything from that. It was mostly just the how do I want to, like the order of the story, the order of events in the story, and the language, cleaning that up, and making everything flow more.
And 10 commas in every sentence. Well, commas are free, you can't think of anything else to put in. You put in a comma.
There you go. So we will post, Wolf Creek is the book. We will post to all of Bill's books. I would like to ask, just wrapping up, where can our listeners, so post all the books, we'll post to Amazon and everything there. If our listeners want to find out, you'll get the books or find out more from you, connect with you, where else can they do that?
Well, I have an email address. Is that appropriate to give?
You tell me.
That? Okay. Yeah, it's Pardue. I'm trusting you now. It's Pardue. SVV is in Sam Victor Victor at yahoo.com.
Okay. If you get some great emails, we'll come back to this again. We'll read them on the air.
All right.
Last question before we get out of here. Is there anything, I think we covered a decent amount of material. I wanted to ask you about traveling, but didn't even get there. Anything I didn't ask you that I probably should have? And I'll let either of you, Patrick, actually, you go first on that one.
I think we covered everything. I think we covered it all.
Anything else,
Yeah.
Bill? No?
No,
Good?
I think you did really well. Thank you.
I appreciate that. You are easy guest to have. I could talk to both of you for quite a while with the stories you have. So thank you for joining us, and I look forward to doing this again in the future.
And you take care of those sons of yours.
I'll try.
They're your legacy.